Hi, I'm Jim Gordon, and you're watching Market 1 Minute. Joining us is Deven Soni. He is the chairman and CEO of Matador Technologies. Deven, welcome.
Great. Thank you for having me, Jim.
It is great to have you, sir. Okay, let's talk a bit and tell us more about Matador Technologies.
Absolutely. Matador is a publicly traded company focused on acquiring and growing Bitcoin per share. We are solely focused on the Bitcoin ecosystem and truly focused on a long-term strategy of accumulating Bitcoin over time.
Okay, and how do you define success for Matador's Bitcoin accumulation strategy over the next 2 to 3 years?
We've got a publicly traded goal of acquiring 1,000 Bitcoin as a starting point and scaling from there as our business grows and evolves. So I think over the next 24 months, we want to get to that 1,000, which would make us one of the top 20 holders of Bitcoin of publicly traded companies, and then get to a point where we can kind of scale up into being a top 10 provider.
And Deven, what strategic principles guide decision-making when market volatility conflicts with long-term convictions?
I think for us, our entire team have been part of the Bitcoin ecosystem for over 10 years. So we've seen a whole lot of ups and downs. The most important thing is to understand what our strategy and what direction we're going in before that volatility hits, which we have, which is we're always focused on accumulating. We're always focused on maximizing our holdings without taking undue risk. So the main thing we can do there is really just stay the course, bring in capital strategically when it makes sense, take a breath when it doesn't make sense, but we're always kind of rowing that right direction based on what the market allows from a stock price perspective.
And Deven, how do you ensure that Matador remains different from other Bitcoin-focused public companies?
So I think one of the things that we've seen in the market during the last cycle, we built Matador in 2021 and 22, probably around the same time that some of the earliest digital asset treasury companies were launching, and a full 2 to 3 years before this kind of wave of DATs kind of got created. We're first off solely focused on Bitcoin. Secondly, we are fair weather and foul weather sort of Bitcoin holders. And I think thirdly, we really have an internal team that's only focused on that as an operating plan. So it's not kind of been our, sort of Hail Mary. So if you look at now, there's probably 200 companies that own Bitcoin in their balance sheet, a full 150 then probably don't talk about it anymore and kind of, hide under the rug a little bit. And we've kind of been loud and proud about our strategy ever since we went public, and I think we'll continue to do so.
And Deven, you recently announced an intention to spin out your gold treasury business. Why does this make sense in today's market?
Well, when we started the business, one of the things that we were really focused on was building tools on top of Bitcoin. I think as we've realized that internally for Matador itself, being more focused on accumulation versus taking, sort of operating time and energy into building new stuff is really not the core of what our shareholders want. That's kind of part one. And I think part two is we see a massive opportunity to take the same sort of infrastructure, the same playbook that we built with Bitcoin and take it to a market, gold, which really hasn't had the same sort of digitization happen yet, the same sort of accumulation strategies. You've got a lot of ETFs like you have in Bitcoin, but you haven't had really companies focused on maximizing gold. So I think for us, that's a really interesting opportunity to take what we've learned in Bitcoin and apply it to a market that's 10 times larger and also do it in a way that benefits our current shareholders.
And what would you like Matador to be known for by investors and the broader market?
I think a few things. Number one is really just unwavering conviction on the core thesis, despite, sort of the market headwinds. I think secondly, really leveraging all the tools in the toolbox of public companies to do right by shareholders. I think the reason we went public when we did, back in 2024 was to leverage the capital markets to scale our strategy. I think we've done that quite effectively. And I think that's one of those things that as new tools and innovative products and financial structures evolve, that's something we want to continue to use and be leaders in.
And finally, Deven, if we were to revisit this conversation in 3 years, what does success look like to you?
Well, I think one is broader capital markets interest kind of globally in Bitcoin, like there was a couple of years ago, tied with us being, sort of again on that top 10 leaderboard of being one of the largest kind of Bitcoin holders globally, being innovative in terms of M&A and yield generation, but also doing so from a perspective of risk generation. So never having lost a Bitcoin, being a top 10 holder, owning several thousand BTC, and having a sort of a commensurate market cap, which is probably significantly higher than we are today.
Deven Soni, it's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Gordon. Thanks for watching this Market 1 Minute on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with other videos that we're putting out, You can click subscribe just below me or click on this list to see other great videos from Market One. And thank you again for watching.